If you don't know the Black Beast for his devastating knockout power, and more recently for his flying knees, you might know him for saying some of the funniest stuff you've ever heard. He's as deadly as they come, but one step out of the octagon, and he'll turn into the sweetest guy you've ever known. But it wasn't always exactly like that. Did you know that once he badly beat up a Ku Klux Klan member, and that eventually led him to spend 3.5 years in jail? Or that before MMA, he was a very promising boxing protege of the living legend George Foreman? Or what about the fact that he saved close to 100 people during Hurricane Harvey? Please allow me to give you 10 fascinating facts about Derrick the Black Beast Lewis. Number 10. He had a very rough childhood. Growing up as a black kid in New Orleans was tough in itself. But you know what's even tougher? Growing up as one of 7 siblings, with just a single mother to care for all of them. And like every other single mom out there, she too was looking for a helping hand. Unfortunately, her helping hand turned out to be the most traumatic experience for her entire family. Derrick's first glimpses of fighting were in his own home, where he had to watch his mom and stepdad engage in fistfights almost every single day. And you can guess who won. There was no escape for him or his family, and all he could do was stand and watch his mother get abused. I bet now you can see where his knockout power comes from. Number 9. He was a street fighter. I can't say his whole childhood was wrecked by bad decisions. In fact, the only good move his family made was to relocate to Houston in order to escape the traumatic and abusive environment. Still, you'd have guessed that Houston wasn't all rainbows and sunshine either, and you'd be right. With no guidance and a history of violence throughout his childhood, Lewis found the worst outlet for his pent-up anger and frustration: street fighting. And for a kid like Lewis, this would not turn out well in the long run. The Black Beast claims he was fighting on the streets just about every day, which eventually turned his focus to a gym where he started boxing. Just as he'd found a good outlet and was getting ready for his first amateur fight, the gym closed without notice, and Lewis fell into his cycle of misery once again. Number 8. He once beat up a Ku Klux Klan member. All I can say is that member of the Klan probably chose the worst guy to mess with. Lewis was already pissed and damaged beyond repair, and when you add racism to the mix, you can guess how it went. This particular incident took place when Lewis was out drinking one night, just 2 weeks after graduating high school. He ran into a member of the Klan who insulted Lewis, and despite the fact that this man was literally carrying a shotgun, Lewis went nuts on him. In fact, Derrick beat the guy so badly that he lost sight in his left eye, apart from a number of other serious bodily injuries. Still, what's really surprising is that this incident did not land Lewis in jail. He was arrested 4 days later, but after court proceedings, he was given 2 years probation, which would eventually lead him to jail. So stay tuned to find out about it later in the video. Number 7. Football got him a full college scholarship. Yep, the Black Beast was a footballer far before he was a fighter. And it fit him, especially when you look at the sheer size of this guy. And it wasn't just the natural physique either. Derrick had the talent for football as well. And playing for his high school team, he was able to land a football scholarship at Kilgore Junior College. He ended up successfully playing there for a whole year. But since he didn't have a job, and in his own words, nobody wanted to help him, he was struggling to pay the fines and fees from his probation. So in the end, he could no longer pay for them. As a result, his terms of probation were violated, and he had to kiss his dream of a normal life goodbye and went to jail. Number 6. He was George Foreman's protege after getting out of prison. Yep, we're talking about the same George Foreman, with a boxing record of 76 wins, and also with the famous grill, of course. Lewis got into boxing as soon as he was released from prison, and he showed so much promise that in just a little while, Foreman took him under his wing in Houston. During this time, Derrick and Foreman grew close, and the Black Beast often compares the legendary boxer to his grandfather. But it was more his boxing prowess than his people skills that made Foreman like him so much. In fact, he was so good that Foreman's management was willing to fly him out to Vegas and train at Floyd Mayweather's gym. So it's obvious that Foreman really wanted him to give boxing a go, and even got him his very first car, a Buick. Also, he was going to accommodate Lewis in a nice high-rise apartment in Vegas. But at the end, Lewis decided to take the MMA path, and as a result, his car got repossessed by Foreman, and he didn't get to enjoy the high-rise apartment promised by the boxing legend. Number 5. The moment he chose MMA over boxing. This is where the worst and yet the best years of Derrick's life started. As stated before, because Derrick had violated his probation, he was served with a 5-year sentence. However, luck finally came to his aid, and he was granted parole after being denied twice previously, so he ended up serving 3.5 years instead of 5. But in those 1,277 days of incarceration, Lewis had a lot of time to rethink his ways. He wanted to turn his life around as soon as he got out, and one of his biggest dreams at the time was to have Bruce Buffer announce his name in a cage. And so as soon as Lewis was declared a free man, he decided to go back to boxing and actually give it a try this time. At the same time, one of his friends encouraged him to join a local MMA gym. And even though he turned out to be phenomenal at boxing, it just didn't sit right with him. His heart was set on MMA, and sure, he could have made a huge career out of boxing, but Lewis made his debut as an MMA fighter instead, in 2010, and he's never looked back. Number 4, he once stopped a robber by himself. I mean, could this guy have picked a worse guy to rob? Seems like Lewis had had enough of the law in his earlier years, seeing how he quite literally took the law into his own hands and stopped a robber without the help of the police. This unlucky fella stumbled upon Derrick's truck and thought it'd be an easy target. He couldn't have been more wrong. Just as he was in the middle of jimmying the lock, Derrick, or should I say his fist, caught this poor guy. Afterwards, Derrick posted a pic of his bruised knuckles, but you should have seen the other guy. His whole head was wrapped in bandages when the police came to arrest him. I bet that's the only time a criminal was happy to see the police. Number 3, he felt death once. If you've been following the Black Beast for the last few years, you'd have noticed he's not the same shining star he once was. Ever since he lost to Cyril Gane back in 2020, Derrick's last few fights have been disappointing for some fans. But it turns out the man hasn't just lost his fighting spirit overnight. It's actually injuries and health issues ruining his octagon game, specifically the deadly weight-cutting techniques. Before his weigh-in for his fight against Sergey Spivak, Derrick went crazy over his weight cut. He waited 3 days before the weigh-in and then cut 25 pounds in the next 3 days. As a result, he literally blacked out right before the weigh-ins and didn't have any energy during the fight and the whole next week. In Derrick's own words, he thought he had died and got so scared that he doesn't want to go through something like that ever again. Number 2, he saved 100 people in Hurricane Harvey. Turns out, he isn't just the people's champ in the octagon. You might remember Hurricane Harvey sowing destruction all over Houston in 2017. What's sad is that officers weren't helping victims of the storm unless there was a life or death situation. This did not sit well with the people's hero, and he literally just took his Chevy truck out and drove all over town looking for people to pick up. Derrick was out all day from 8 in the morning to 10 at night. His wife even got mad at him because he didn't eat anything the whole day. But that didn't matter because he easily saved 100 people from harm's way. Number 1, he's the greatest knockout artist in UFC history. Let's be honest, looking at a roster with the biggest guys out there, we want them to punch it out instead of going for a boring game of grappling. Luckily for us, Lewis loves punching more than he loves winning, and that's what makes him a pure wrecking ball. Stand-up fighting, or swangin' and bangin', as Lewis calls it, is what makes Lewis one of the deadliest fighters on the roster. This literally means that whenever the Black Beast finds himself trapped on the ground, he'll just shrug it off, stand up, and go straight for his opponent's skull. And it works too. Lewis's knockout power has scored him 14 knockouts in his UFC run, giving him the record for the most knockouts in UFC history. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Go ahead and tell us your valuable opinion in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on so you won't miss any of our videos. And that's it for today. Until then, remember to protect yourself at all times.